individuals, and you can see that that's actually extremely high and the highest among OECD countries. It's really difficult to say. I don't know if you were experiencing the same thing. It's 5 and high. 8 nurses. Sorry, Linda, for not including midwives. I wish that they combined them because you need acknowledgement. But it's 8, and actually that's not among the highest. You can see that it's somewhere in the average. They have 7.6 hospital beds per 1,000, and that is again among one of the higher countries in the OECD country group. You can see that actually, according to this graph, really there is only one higher one, which is Germany. So I explained this a little bit already, but that's a summary. Number of hospitals is 267, among which about 46 are private. So they have a 2-tier system. Basically, public healthcare is offered to everybody, and it's actually compulsory. So it's universal health care, and then in addition to that, you have the ability to purchase private health care. But really, everything is already covered under public. I'll get into that as we go into the next slides. I want to show you a brief video. I think it really encompasses everything I'm going to share with you. I'll go deeper into each one of these points, but it really explains the system very well. Oh, why is it not?
You're connected to them?
Yeah, I need a voice connection.
I think you do have one though. We've been hearing it.
We had audio here. Well, let's start it and see.
I can kind of hear it.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't hear a word. I think you're hearing voices.
Here's the pause.
You know that medications.
Okay.
But it's in the basket.
I can also find it on Google, like on YouTube.
Yeah, we may need
It's not double billing.
And also, I'm going to talk about every one of the points, but I thought it would be nice to.
Let's try this.
Oh, there's something.
See, I told you I heard.
Oh, maybe even here. What about, yeah, that one. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Not all the way. We're gonna go down.
We'll go back.
Can you hear it though, sort of?
Yeah. I mean, I heard it.
Let's go to this.
Do you want me to try with YouTube and see if the sound quality is higher?
If you click here, there's no bar open.
It's so muffled. What am I looking at?
All employers
Yes,
in Austria
thank
have
you.
to register their employee
Nice job, thanks a
with
lot.
the district
How do I move this
health
back
insurance.
though? Why am I so technologically inept?
Get out of the PowerPoint.
Okay. Alright, okay, here we go.
Tonight we're going to take a quick look at Austria. Austria ranked number 3 in a European survey on healthcare quality, and life expectancy in Austria is 80 years. A government-run system, but it has private options. Katie Coco takes a look.
Austria has a universal healthcare system. All employers in Austria have to register their employees with a district health insurance fund within 7 days of starting work. how much an employee contributes to that public health insurance depends on his job and salary. Employers contribute an equal amount. Under the Austrian healthcare system, any basic healthcare services or treatment in public hospitals, basic dental care, medication are covered, although there are small co-pays depending on income. 3/4 of Austria's healthcare, 76%, is publicly funded through this kind of insurance and a general tax revenue. And Austria ranks 3rd in overall healthcare quality in Europe, according to an annual survey by a European consultancy. Austria spends some 10.1% of GDP on healthcare, compared to 16% of GDP in the United States. Austria's $3,700 per capita is half of the U.S. spending of $7,290. The doctor population ratio is 1 to 263, compared to 1 to 416 in the United States. And life expectancy is higher in Austria, at 80 years versus 78 in the United States. Austria boasts of cutting bureaucracy by the use of a high-tech e-card with electronic signature and personal data for proof of medical insurance, eliminating paperwork. Almost the entire Austrian population is covered by social health insurance. About 1/3 of Austrians also take out private health coverage to pay for what is called a special class of hospital room, or to pay for doctors not affiliated with the state-affiliated hospitals or the state insurance fund. Private hospitals are not obliged to admit patients and can pick and choose depending on the patient's ability to pay and the quality of private health insurance. So while Austria has universal health care, the ability to pay more for special doctors and treatment at hospital basically sets up a 2-tier system in terms of the level of care available to people. Liv?
We call it 2-tier.
Okay. So I thought that was a nice short clip to sort of give you a summary of the things that I'm going to be talking about. They didn't talk about the history, so I'll do that now. So here's a brief history. In 1956, Austria passed the General Social Insurance Law. I'm going to ask Linda here to pronounce this for us in High German, since I certainly cannot.
Allgemeines Sozialversicherungssystem.
Now you really get a deep feel for it, right? Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
So the social insurance law is actually comprised of more than just health insurance. It also has accident insurance and pension insurance for all insured, including dependents in the households. And today this law guarantees that all of Austria's inhabitants have equitable access to public health services, irrespective of their age, sex, origin, social status, or income. So universal health care. So let's talk about the public health insurance for a little bit. So basically each of the 9 Austrian provinces have a health insurance fund, and it's supervised together by the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, the Ministry of Health, as well as the provincial authorities. So actually their goal is for it to be highly decentralized and not give too much power to one entity. As you heard in the video, employers are legally obligated to register their employees to one of these funds within 7 days, and all dependents are automatically covered. Again, basically what this means is that economically active populations contribute to their health insurance as well as the employers, while the state budget, which comes from general taxation, cover inactive populations. And right now, approximately 4% of the population is unemployed. So what's covered by public health insurance? Basically, it's 3-tiered: primary, secondary, and tertiary care. This includes just a broad list and really just about anything you can think of. Because when we'll get into private healthcare, you'll see that actually no additional services are provided via private healthcare. It's just sort of extra amenities. So hospital visits, emergency care, ambulance services, specialized inpatient and outpatient care, health technology, therapies, preventive and health promotion services, vaccinations, screenings, rehabilitation and long-term care services, pharmacies, dental service, travel costs, everything. Everything is covered by public health care in Austria. The funding sources, I've mentioned this a little bit in the last slides. So state budget, which is generated from general taxation. Employers and employees actually have to give an equal amount of funds. So they split it 50-50, and depending on income, there are also co-pays. So the private health insurance system. So again, as I've mentioned this in the past, in like the last 5 minutes, it's really supplementary or in addition to public healthcare. It's not that if you have private, you're going to get extra services. It is purchased by about a third of the population, and it's referred to often in Austria as comfort class insurance, because what it affords you basically is being able to stay in a private room as opposed to like a 6-person room. Also, you get better food. You can go to private hospitals, one of the 46 that I mentioned, but it's not to say that the quality of care is going to be higher. It's really just having more personalized care. And again, you have shorter wait times, which is important to a lot of people. I mean, it's important to me too. But certainly I think that this is a distinguishing factor between private and public healthcare in Austria.
So you can use the private insurance in the non-private hospital?
Yes, you can use them in both. And actually, if you have private health insurance and then you go to a public healthcare facility, then you still have shorter wait lines. Okay, so some problems. This is what I promised you I would talk about last, because I actually think it's most interesting, is this issue with aging populations. It really, like, how do you deal with this situation? And I think Austria is still figuring it out. According to the Statistik Austria, I'll try and give it the ratio of elderly, which is over than 64 years of age, to work age people, which is 15 to 64, will rise from 0.23 today to 0.50 by 2050. So that's double. Whatever way you look at it, that's a pretty staggering statistic, and they really have to do something to figure this out, because essentially this is what's happening all over the world. While life expectancy is increasing because our technology is getting better, and the difference between communicable and non-communicable diseases, the fertility rate is falling. So in 2009, the number of children per woman was 1.39, and the women's average age at first birth was 28 years old. So basically, what does this mean? Austria is going to need to increase its public spending on pensions, healthcare, and long-term care. I mean, as people get older, they need specialized care. Currently, they're only spending about 0.7% of the GDP on long-term care, and they're going to need to dramatically increase that as more people get older. Of course, you can see how this might present a problem, because the contributors to the welfare system are those who are working. So if more people are not working, but more people need care, then you're going to have some sort of deficit in the system, and it's going to have to be filled somehow. And generally speaking, that happens from either general taxation or the allocations of funds. So like I said, I think Austria is really still figuring that out. I didn't see a lot of evidence in the literature suggesting that something dramatic has happened, but I think they're starting to be very aware of this and allocating more funds into long-term care. And that is my presentation. Thank you. Got lots of sources. Any questions? Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. I'd like to ask 2 people to speak in favor of and against the idea of a 2-tier system. So here you have a high-income country that has a healthcare system that sounds like it works quite well. What percent GDP? 10 something, right? So they're putting
11.1.
11.1. So they're putting a lot of money into their healthcare system. It works. So somebody volunteer, please, to speak on behalf of why this is good to have a 2-tier system, and somebody speak on behalf of why it's bad to have a 2-tier system. Who wants to do the bad first? Good. Gil, and who wants to do the good? Who wants to? So you're going to do bad, right? Why it's
Now,
bad?
when you're talking about 2-tier system is, but this is something I didn't understand if it's unique to Austria, because in every place in Europe there is also a private.
Yeah.
Every place I think in the world.
Right.
Yeah. But what I want to do is I want to talk about whether that's good or bad.
All right.
Okay. Yes, even in Sweden, which again is my model of a socialized healthcare system, 10% of the population now has private insurance. So everyone does. The question is that good or bad? What are the advantages? Or to put it differently, what are the advantages and disadvantages? Okay, so you're going to tell us it's bad, right? Is that what you volunteered to do? So who wants to say it's good to have this?
Don't tell it's very bad.
Very bad. Who wants to say it's
I'll do
fine?
the good even though I don't think it is.
Fine, good. Because this is just a
Somebody
debate.
who
That's
wants
fine.
to think it's
Okay,
Where's
so,
Diego?
Charlie, go ahead. Tell
Well, I
us,
think it may be an additional form of rationing.
right?
I mean, eventually there's a limit to what the country could put into their health resources, so you have an additional pocket, which is basically, you know, the cream in terms of the socioeconomic status. So, you know, it's kind of like a different, unregulated form of progressive taxing. They're actually paying
In a way.
more to get, you know, services, so you can spend less of the GDP because they're, you know, putting in their part more.
Okay, and Gil, why is it bad?
I'll give some explanation from also from our system now. I think it's private, the two-tier system. It's like whiskey, you know,
Like whiskey?
like whiskey, because you can have a little bit of it and enjoy that, and it can be no doubt about it, would be even healthy, you know. If you take high doses of that, obviously it's bad. The point is that you let the people control how much they use that, and that's the problem. Because the two-tier system can be like, you know, an excellent way to allow some people some extra benefits of health. For example, if they want insurance for dental prostheses that is not covered, which is very expensive, or some very fancy cancer treatments that were not approved or not approved by the FDA, and they won, you know, in NHS, so it's fine. But if you let the people or the government to abuse that, then you get very bad results. And the results are in any spectrum that you can judge. For example, let me take the system that you just described in Austria, that I asked you, when we have the same thing here in Israel, is that you have a government hospital which is sponsored by the government, and also it's sponsored by the contribution of the citizen, which pay tax for that. And then you will have somebody who has some insurance, and he will get more privileges in the same room. And these privileges are what? Getting better food, better service, but not only that. He gets more attention from the physician and from the team and from the doctors. And why is that? Because the doctors, the nurses, and the team gets paid by his private insurance. So you'll have inequality of treatment in the same room, in the same government hospital, because of these reasons. And equality in quality of care, not only because he's got a cheeseburger and he's getting home without cheese. No, it's the quality of
We're probably
treatment.
not giving cheeseburgers.
But and who's going to get that? You know, who's going to get the better care? So who's going to get the better care? Those who have the ability to pay for that, or they're employed by firms that can pay for that. Now, if that's being abused by the government, what we're going to have? We're going to have a smaller and smaller basket being provided by the government, which a certain place it's not just going to damage you morally, but it's going to damage your health in any measure that you're going to see, and you can measure that, and you're going to have even larger differences between those who can pay for health through the private insurance and those who can't. And you get differences in, for example, in longevity and in mortality of infants and in screening for different things, okay? And these big gaps in health that will eventually occur, they will damage the society and damage the economy as we know it. So, two-tier system can be nice to have, but it can be abused. And I believe that it's very difficult not to abuse that, you know. So if you, in France or in Sweden, you have strong political environment that will prevent that from happening, but if you're in Israel and your political environment is not strong because of because the big insurance companies and the doctors' boards, etc., are very influential, then you have abuse of that.
There is one more point to make. Just in terms of societal harm reduction. I mean, there's always a risk that if you don't offer a certain market, it'll happen, but it'll be a black market, or it'll be a parallel market. One of the things I was surprised the most when I was doing my fellowship in Toronto is the fact that there was medical tourism going down to Buffalo to get MRIs done for $500 because the waiting list in Toronto was so high. So there wasn't a private market, but what was actually happening is that Canadians were financing the American system, the U.S. system, so to speak.
Right.
So there's also an aspect to take into account of societal harm reduction and how much you can actually regulate a market that there will always be quite a lot of demand for.
So I'm
I
going.
want to say only one thing about why it's good, because
Yeah.
I think it's important. It's good because there's competition,
Mhm.
right? So if there's no private insurance and everything is by the government, you may find yourself like Russia, which everything is like there's no competition, there's nothing. So it brings competition, so that's a good thing about it.
So I'm just going to try to summarize this, and then we're going to go on. We're going to hear Davey next. Then we're going to have a break. So you'll come in after the break, okay? I think this is the spelling. It's called realpolitik. It took me a long time to understand what realpolitik means. And it's this fancy term that everybody uses. It's not related to healthcare. It's related to politics, global politics. And realpolitik says you basically can have all the theories you want about what's right and what's wrong. Somewhere you have to actually just make a decision about what's practical. So realpolitik means practical decision making at an international level. And it seems to me that there are reasons why almost all the healthcare systems, at least in the high income and middle income countries, have more than one tier, and that's realpolitik. Okay, and whether it's good or bad, it is, because we're hearing about it. So we have to understand why it is, and I think that there are a couple reasons, and my social beliefs would want one system, but you do stimulate competition with this. You take away the complaining. So you can say, fine, if you're rich or powerful, you go pay for extra. And a lot of people do, and then they can't complain that the government isn't providing for them. So it's a way to handle that complaints. And also, and I think Shali said this, I'm just going to restate it, it's a way to bring extra money into the healthcare system. Okay? So people are voluntarily contributing. And so they're going to in Austria, they're going to the public hospitals using private money. So what's essentially happening is they're supplementing all of the tax dollars and employer dollars that otherwise would come in. Danielle?
Is this what you call Cadillac care in the US?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, you see, it's a question of how many people get it. So in Israel, there are four levels of care. The second level is 80% of the population has it, so it can't be Cadillac. Okay, so here the third level or the fourth level would be the Cadillac care. In Sweden, with 10% of the population, that's Cadillac care. I mean, with equipment care. Yeah. And then the question is, what are you getting? So if you get better food, does it really matter? Does it matter if you're in a single room or with 3 other people? Yes and no. Okay. Waiting times, if you've got a sore leg and you've had it for a month or 2 months, so maybe you have to wait 1 month to see the doctor instead of a week. That many people would say is okay. You want to pay to jump the queue for your sore leg, that's okay. If you're having a heart attack, everybody needs to be treated immediately. And then the question is all that gray zone stuff. So ideally, I would say everyone should get the same health care, practically speaking, particularly because all the Western world is moving to the right. Here in Israel is an example, but everywhere, you see more and more privatization. Kingdom?
Yeah,
Davey, come on down, let's get set up.
Could the concept of real politics describe what's happening in Thailand, with the healthcare expenditure GDP of 4%, and yet promising or proclaiming?
You gotta move in a little bit. These seats are, whoever designed these seats did a perfect job as long as the room is empty. Right? There's no room to sit, but it's very nice. Yeah, I do.
Oh, great. It's just in my email.
I'm sorry, so,
No, I'm just saying. So does real politics describe what's happening in Thailand, where they spend 4% of their GDP in health care, yet they promise universal health care? So one thing is to proclaim that you've got universal health care, but the reality, the reality is you can't really afford to cover, maybe you can cover everyone, but the quality is not so good.
I think the definition of realpolitik would not be accurate. That's not a definition of realpolitik. They're not telling the truth.
Right.
Okay? They're not dealing with reality. So realpolitik is dealing with reality.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, can you get back into your email? I just sent it to you. I couldn't get
Ah,
into
okay.
it.
That's fine. Lynn, go ahead.
I'm just, I'm not how it works in Israel, but where I come from is like also like if you have a private patient, like he gets more attention because the doctors get paid more. But I don't know, you said for the doctors and nurses get paid more. I just don't know that the nurses also get more money. So it's actually like the patient gets more treatment and more attention, and the doctor tells you as a nurse or as a midwife, oh, this like you have to be more careful or whatever. But actually the nurse or the midwife, we don't get more money because we treat like private. But the doctors make us like be crazy about them, and it's very upsetting. Like it's very upsetting also to give them like a special like room, whatever, but we don't get anything of it.
How is a patient treated in a capitalist system by a socialist nurse?
Same.
Hmm?
If the nurse is socialist,
Resentful.
she wants to do it the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So there can be what I would call a backlash. Okay, it's interesting, right?
No, it's actually true. Like
I mean-
sometimes you almost get upset with you should not get upset with the women, but because the system makes you treat them so special, you almost get upset. Like
and certainly in my training experiences, where if somebody came up and said, when I was a resident, somebody came up to me and said, this is a special patient, they're a fancy person, I'd resent that. And the nurses likewise. And that person might not get as good a care as the bum who's in the next bed.
it's very true.
That's also human nature. I mean, there's all sorts of them. Okay. Davey, you're on.
So I'm presenting on Peru, and I just wanted to point out, even in the beginning, there's so many different types of places in Peru. You've got the rainforest, you've got mountains, you've got the coast, city, and just a lot of different environments, which will be really relevant in the types of healthcare that Peru has. So starting with the basics, Peru is home to the Incan Empire. In the 1500s, it was colonized by Spain, and this decimated 80% of the indigenous population, in part because of war, in part from colonization, but also because Spanish colonizers brought over a lot of disease that didn't exist before in Peru. and people had no antibodies and no protection for it. And there was sort of a traditional healthcare system within tribes, but it wasn't prepared for this, and the population really never fully recovered due to repeat pandemics that kept occurring like every other decade. However, in 1821, Peru proclaimed independence. In 2014, 45% of the population